Well, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy C-Zar, and we are talking about Bitcoin today. Hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, you guys. The point of this video is going to hopefully help us determine an outlook for the coming bull cycle, the coming end of the bull cycle, I should say, right? We've been in a bull cycle in crypto since January of 2023, right? We've been in this bull cycle now. It might not have felt like it at every single moment, but I think you look back at the charts, and it's very obvious that we are absolutely, if you identify this as a bull cycle, this is a bull cycle, this as a bull cycle, last cycle's bull cycle is here. I think it's very obvious we're in a bull cycle now, right? We're in that finale phase, and the idea of this video is I want to accurately portray and illustrate my suspicions of how much growth we have left in this cycle, right? Where the price will top off, and then also specifically how long do we have left in this cycle. And I'm going to use a couple of very basic metrics to do so. So if that sounds good to you, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, my friends, and let's get into it. So I want to start off with the RSI, the monthly RSI. You go on a monthly basis here. I mean, we could do the 2-month as well, to be completely fair, but I think the monthly will be more practical. We look at the monthly RSI here, and you can see, first and foremost, actually, let's bring this up a little bit more with the price. Okay, you can see that we've got 2 peaks in the RSI here, 2 peaks here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 peaks there on the monthly RSI, and then 1 peak here, 2 peaks here. Okay, 2 peaks per cycle. Okay, and all of these peaks match, they line up with this trend line here, right? If we blow up the RSI, you can see it, they go in succession with this trend line, right? Something kind of like that. Yeah, perfect. If we also notice, it's not the first peak, but the second peak that Bitcoin finds its high, right? Literally the second peak in the RSI, you can see right there, boom, that's where it found its cycle high for the very first bull cycle. The next cycle high came here, and boom, you can see that was on the second peak in the RSI. The next high was here, and boom, that was the second peak in the RSI. Last bull cycle for Bitcoin, okay? The last bull cycle, everybody says things differently depending on how they see things, right? Some people would say that the bull cycle ended here on this month. Some people, myself included, would say the bull cycle ended here. The all-time high was here. That's absolutely the truth. The all-time high was on the second peak, but the end of the cycle was here. And I'm going to validate or bring some logic to that, at least right now. Okay, so looking at this cycle, I don't think it would be fair to say that the bear cycle lasted all this time, right? The bear cycle very clearly ended on this first drop, right? Out of this double bottom that you had here. This first one was the end of the bear cycle. This second one was the beginning of the bull cycle. End of the bear, beginning of the bull. So what's the middle? That's what they call a crab market, or it's a sideways market. This is not a bull market. That's not the beginning of the bull market. That's not the end of the bear market. This was the end of the bear market. This was the beginning of the bull market. So end of the bull market here, all-time high though, okay? And the all-time high, so the end of the cycle was on the first peak, and that was the first time the end of the cycle, right? Every single cycle so far has ended on the second peak. That's where the all-time high has been. But last cycle, the cycle ended on the first peak. The all-time high still came in on the second peak. This was the first cycle that we had a double top, and the first cycle that the second peak did not go all the way up to the trend line. Something to mention, okay? But every cycle, regardless of how far away the peaks are, we have had 2 peaks each cycle. And each cycle, it's the second peak in the RSI that marks the top of Bitcoin's price, not the end of the bull cycle, right? We've established that it's not the end, but the top, okay? And there's a difference. We've just established why that's a difference, right? Or what the difference is. Now what I want to do is I want to measure between the second, from the second peak to second peak. That's what I want to do. Essentially from Bitcoin high to Bitcoin high of each cycle, but using the RSI here, right? So second peak to second peak, the first time, that was 29 months. The second time, second peak to second peak, that was 49 months. And then this time here, second peak to second peak, oh, that's the first peak, second peak's right there, 46 months. So a little bit of similarity here between the last 2 cycles. Not so much similarity in the first cycle, and that's okay. Here, from the second peak to where we are now, we are about 38 months into this cycle based off of the RSI that we've got going on here. Okay, so my question to you and to myself is where do we think this cycle could end just based off of the numerical status that we have here. I think it's obvious we're not going to stop at a 29-month period. It's possible we could stop something less than 46 months or less than 49 months. Maybe we do stop at 38 months. You never know. But going off of the realms of normality, associating it with what we have here, 46 months is pretty damn close to 49 months. Call it a coincidence if you want, but maybe there's something to that. Let's run off of this range that we have. Okay, so 46 months would put us all the way out in August of 2025. You can see the date down here. That would be August of 2025, okay? That's if this cycle from the second peak to the second peak in the RSI, whenever that may or may not be. We draw a trend line here again, right? We haven't even interacted with it the first time this cycle, right? We normally have two peaks, or the second peak at least afterwards. The second peak doesn't have to interact with it, but the first peak does, right? I don't assume that's the first peak, no more than I would assume that was the first peak, right? So no, I don't think that's the first peak. I don't think we've interacted with it yet. But what we can assume is that in 46 months, we would assume to have, at a minimum, 46 months, our second peak come in. And I don't know if that would make too much sense, because going at the current trajectory we would have, on the monthly RSI, that puts those peaks pretty damn close together. If I mean, unless we hit all the way up here by the end of this month or by the end of January, which, by the way, I mean, that Bitcoin would have to go above 200K to see that kind of growth in the RSI. No kidding. It would have to see prices above 200K for the RSI to get that high. If we were to do that in the next couple months, I want to delete some of this stuff here. Okay, and actually just show you. Or maybe we don't have to delete it. Maybe I can just show you, okay? From this peak here, that high peak, to this next peak, that was a 4-month gap. Okay, that was four months in between peaks. Okay, the next set of peaks, we had 7 months. Okay, the next set of peaks, we had 4 months. And you guessed it, the last set of peaks that we had was 7 months again. So 29 months from last peak to last peak, 49 months from last peak to last peak, 46 months from last peak to last peak, each 2-peak system having 4 to 7 months in between each set here, okay? If Bitcoin were to run all the way up to this high here right now by the end of January, let's even say by the end of let's say by the end of January, okay? January to August, that would literally be 7 months. So that would make sense, I suppose, right? Based off of what we've seen before, that we could end the cycle in 46 months if we were to run all the way up here by the end of January. But I don't think we're going to, again, right? And the reason why I keep saying that is I'm trying to, if it's confusing, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to establish the reality here that the cycle is probably not ending soon at all, my friends, okay? And what it would take, in my opinion, just based off of this RSI, what it would take is we need 2 peaks. We need 2 peaks. We need the first one to interact with this trend line, this white line here. Let's make it a different color so that it's not so distracting. We've got so many damn colors up here, or so many damn lines. Let's make this one red, okay? We need to hit the red line. The second peak is where the cycle top happens, but we have to have the first peak. We haven't had that first peak yet, okay? To get Bitcoin on the monthly basis all the way up here, I'm not kidding you, the price would have to double from here, okay? It would need that much. You don't believe me? Let's just look at it here, right? When you were at an 80 on the RSI, it was here. That was November 2020. To get to that first peak, that was March. So November to March, what did you do? November 2020, you opened up at a price of 14K, just below 14K, but let's say 14K. And then by that peak, you were at a high of 61,000. Okay, literally from the same. So that's a lot more than double. I'm not kidding. To get to this first peak, you guys, Bitcoin would have to see an immense amount of growth in a short amount of time, or maybe less immense growth, still strong growth, but over a longer period of time, it could grow. It could grow, over the months to come up to that area. I think that we will have our first peak in April, May. That's kind of what I'm assuming it, right? We haven't had our first peak yet. So if we're going to have our first peak, if we were to have our first peak by the end of January, again, what that would take to hit this line, the reason why I'm so hung up on this is that at that point, then it would make sense that we would have potentially 7 months until the end of the cycle, right? 7 months between that last peak. We could have 4 months based off of other iterations, and if it were to be 4 months after January, 4 months from there would be May. That would bring us down to 43 months. And out of what we've seen over the past 2 cycles from the second peak to second peak measurements, it's been 49 to 46. This is calling for a quarter of a year less than the range that we could expect. So already I'm assuming probably even in the earliest scenario, which would require Bitcoin to be probably double in price from here so that we could get the first peak up here by the end of January, giving it a 4-month period, the shortest amount of time that we've seen between these two peaks, to land in May. That would be 43 months. And we can make sense out of it that way, I suppose. Okay, 43 months that way. Because it's less than 46, it's less than 49. That doesn't make sense to me, but it's still close enough, right? It's still within that range. Odds are we probably are either going to see more than 46 or a little bit less than 46. We could see more than 49 or a little bit less than 49, right? But it's going to be something around this area. So at the minimum, I feel like the minimum time frame we've established would be May of 2025. But that seems a bit ridiculous, right? Because we would need 2 peaks in the RSI. We've already established that to get this high, the last time we were at these readings in the RSI in the last cycle, to get to that peak all the way up to this trend line, you went from 14K to 60K, okay? If we were to top by the end of May, it'd be January. I feel like I'm repeating myself so much. You guys should understand what I'm saying by now. Let's move on from there. Okay, so 43 months, 46 months, that's the minimum. Let's say it was 49 months. 49 months would be November of 2025. That we see our second peak, going back to the longer measurements here, right? Not the gaps between peaks, but the second peak to second peak measurement here. 49 months could potentially put Bitcoin cycle at the end in November. If we were to see the longer ends of this range. And I could see November. I feel like we don't see 49 months. I personally think that it'll be October. We might see 48 months. And that makes sense too, right? Again, we don't have to see exactly 49 months. It doesn't have to be exactly 46 months. Likely it will be something different, just outside or just inside that range. But November, we can work with that. November, okay. So November, thinking back again at the peaks, we've seen 4 months, 7 months, 4 months, 7 months between peaks. If the end of our cycle, our second peak, were to be in November, that's the 11th month of the year. 4 months before then would be July, which would then implicate that our first peak could be in July, right? Because July, August, September, October, November, that's 4 months, yeah. And then if it was 7 months before, it'd be June, May, April. Our first peak could then be in April. If we were to top, if our first peak interaction were to be accomplished in April, which would be right here, right there, that month there, right there, bam. At this time here, if we were to move up and in April hit that line, 7 months later, we could see November. 4 months later, from April, we could see August, something like that. So giving that August, November kind of time frame as a more expected area on the later side of things, right? The early side of things, we had a May to August time frame. The later side of things, we have an August, November time frame, right? And that's based off of, again, 4 months to 7 months in between peaks. And associating this first peak, again, the only way that we'd get there within the next month would be an immense growth in Bitcoin. And I'm all for it, but I'm calling for Bitcoin to be at 141K by the end of January. I feel like that's the most bullish. I don't see anybody else saying stuff like that, right? So calling for Bitcoin to go all the way up here would require it to be at like 200K. That'd be nuts. That'd be great. I would love it, but I don't know, man. That'd be nuts. If we were at 200K, anyways, I just don't think it's going to happen. But at the earliest, we could see May to August. The later end of that would be August to November, okay, making sense out of this. So that's the time frame for Bitcoin that we're working with, based off of solely off of the RSI here, right? And I don't know if I really have much more that I want to say on the RSI note, so we can move on to price action now. But I just want to say, again, looking at this, how we've done it very specifically each cycle, this cycle already looks much stronger than last cycle did. I associate this peak, I would compare it to this peak of this cycle, this peak of this cycle, this peak of this cycle, right? This peak is stronger than any of them. That doesn't mean that we're going to have the strongest cycle we ever had, but I certainly do anticipate last cycle was a fluke. This cycle will be stronger than last cycle. Now I want to get into the price action, okay? And I want to do something that really, I feel like everybody should know about, but anybody who's watched the video this long, you guys deserve. It's not that you should know this, you deserve to know this stuff right now. So hit that like button, subscribe. Let's talk about this next part, which I think is really eye-opening and exciting personally. Okay, if we look at Bitcoin here, November 2012, that was the very first Bitcoin halving. We look at Bitcoin here, July 2016, that was the second Bitcoin halving. We look at Bitcoin in May of 2020, that was the third Bitcoin halving. And then we take into consideration the most recent Bitcoin halving, which happened in April here. Okay, I have a purpose. From the end of the bear cycle to the high that happened right before the halving, the pre-halving high as we'll call it, from a low to a high. That's what your move was, okay? Low to high. That was your pre-halving move, pre-halving bull cycle, okay? Right there. After the halving, from a low point to a high point, that was your move. And maybe I can draw that a little bit better. From your low point to a high point, that was your move. Pre-halving move, post-halving move. And you can see there's a difference, right? And I don't have to say what the difference is. It's all in the size. They say it doesn't matter, but it matters in this game, man. Low to high. This was the high right before the halving, pre-halving move. Low to high here. This was your pre-halving move. And I feel like I'm drawing it pretty damn accurate, right? A little bit off here and there, of course, but probably pretty damn accurate. That's your pre-halving bull cycle. Your post-halving bull cycle from a low to a high looked like that. So from a low to a high here, post-halving bull cycle. Pre-halving, pre-halving, post-halving, post-halving. You can see the size difference, right? Last cycle, here was our high before the halving. That was our high right there. Our pre-halving move from the low to the high was this. That was our pre-halving move. Our post-halving move, we wouldn't actually even include this low because that was actually pre-halving as well. So let's include the low post-halving. Let's go from right here. Post-halving move was only this, okay? Small post-halving move. And yet still, the post-halving move was larger, significantly larger, I would say, than the pre-halving move. Not quite twice as big like we saw here or here, right? But still sizably bigger, okay? Now running with this idea, from the low here, the beginning of the bull cycle, to this high that happened before the halving, this was our pre-halving move. Look at our pre-halving move this cycle, you guys. It's already a lot bigger than the last pre-halving move, but it's almost on par with last cycle's post-halving move. I very much do theorize that this cycle, by the end of it, will be overall stronger from an overall percentage perspective than the last cycle was. But that was our pre-halving move. If we were to just use this, right, from a low to a high, that's our pre-halving move. If we were to just use that for our post-halving move, right, which we know our post-halving move every single cycle has been largely bigger than the pre-halving move. So if we were to use the pre-halving move's measurement on our post-halving move, that would put Bitcoin all the way up at about $240,000. So essentially what I'm saying is that what we know just by this metric alone is that Bitcoin will not stop at $240,000. It will achieve prices higher than that, and likely much higher than that, right? Oftentimes these things, if we look at this, right, you're basically that much larger in size, okay? That much larger there. That was a little bit, let's be super nitpicky because that was a little bit longer. Let's go. I want to be very perfect with this, from a low to right on that line there. Okay, boom. That was about the extra bit. And I would even say it's a little bit smaller than the extra bit that you would have from this line to this line, right? That's all I'm trying to go with here, okay? I'm going to move that extra bit over here, okay? Just that little tiny extra bit. Which, by the way, again, compared to the other cycles, this post-halving move was a lot smaller than any other like growth compared to the pre-halving move that we had, right? So taking this little bit extra that we saw from last cycle and just putting it here, right there. I feel like that's pretty close. Let's get it right on the money there. Come on, right there. That would give Bitcoin a price of about 400K. I'm thinking by the end of the cycle, Bitcoin sees a $500,000 price, and I'll give you my reasoning for that. But I think something like that, very obvious stuff like that, is interesting and fun to look at, right? Because it's just, again, it's easy, I think, to comprehend and understand. So now here's some stuff that's a little bit more sophisticated, but not that hard to understand either. From a high to a low here of this bull cycle, we went all the way up to the 2272. Found support on the 1618, showing significance there. We found a little bit of resistance on it, sure. Found resistance, topped the cycle off at the 2272, just above it. No doubt it was just above it. Cycle high here to the cycle low. Again, we moved all the way up, we found resistance at the 2272, just above it. Again, just above the 2272. Found support at the 1618. Again, this time a little bit below it, but COVID crash was right on it. Finding support significance at the 1618, showing it there. Again, we take the cycle high to the cycle low, and this time we did not see the 2272. This time we went to the 1618. We went just above it, right to the 1618. Not the 2272. So what we've established there is that Bitcoin at a minimum has gone to its 1618 extension every single cycle, and at a maximum has seen the 2272 every single cycle. And I say every cycle, that's only 3 iterations, but the minimum target, which was last cycle, was the 1618. The 2 cycles before that was the 2272. Okay, we've already established, painstakingly so, that to hit this red line, to hit this trend line in the monthly RSI, you would likely have to more than double in price from here. Okay, just based off of comparable growth that we've seen. And it's not like that. Like technically it's obviously not the same. I really do think if Bitcoin was to move up to 200K by the end of January, I think that we would see this where on this cycle, you know, it took from 14K to 60K. That's almost like a 4x. It's a little bit more than a 4x to see that growth from the same areas in the RSI all the way up to this line. I don't think it's going to take a 4x to get to that first peak personally. But you know, time will tell. Where was I going with that? What was I going to say? I can't remember. But all that to say, again, just to get, oh, okay, that's what it was. To get to this area, to get to our first peak on this trend line, right, which we haven't had yet, we would have to break above 173K. So personally, I don't think we stop at the 1618 like we did last cycle. I do think we go higher. And 462, if you think about it, each time we have gone just above the 2272. We have stopped just above the 2272 anytime that we've interacted with the 2272. And right here, right at this line, that's $500,000. It's a very psychological level. It's $500,000 in itself. And on top of that, that is a $10 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. That's a $10 trillion market cap for Bitcoin at $500,000. So it's a psychological level of resistance in price and in market cap, right? And your 2272 area. I don't think you're going there by the end of May or June. I think it will be by the end of the year. And what I think is going to happen is you're going to get your first peak in the RSI by April, May. Will probably be anywhere from 173K to 260K by April, May, somewhere in this range by April, May, genuinely. And then by the end of the cycle, going into August, September, October, November of 2025, that's when we'll be at this 462K area. That's when we'll be putting in our second peak in the monthly RSI. I hope this all makes sense. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Taking away everything that I've said and just looking at the RSI for what it is, man. Bouncing off the 60. You guys, I meant it when I said it, right? This peak, I would compare it to this peak last cycle, to this peak this cycle, to this peak here. We are getting more bullish readings than we've ever gotten any other cycle, right? Any other cycle. We really, for this phase. Not only that, bouncing off the 60, absurdly bullish. Look at what happened last cycle whenever we bounced off the 60. Right here. We bounced off it literally right there in September 2020. Look at what happened. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months in a row of moving up. And in that 7 months, when we bounced off the 60, by the way, from the low to the high, Bitcoin did a 6.6x when it bounced off the 60 here, okay? Well, the area that we just bounced off of now, it did a 6.6x in the course of 7 months. We bounced off of it here. Bitcoin's done, I guess, not as dramatic of a move yet, right? To a 120% move in the course of 1, 2, 3, 4 months, but we still got some more time. I don't think that it'll be a 6x. This was the end of the cycle. I don't think that we're at the end of the cycle. Well, we are at the end of the cycle. We're in the second half here, but I don't think that we're at like the end. I don't think that we're at the last 6 months of the cycle personally. But I don't know. Seeing a 6.6x. I mean, that would put Bitcoin all the way up. That'd put it above 300K. But I don't see that happening in the next 6 months. I was really just trying to show bouncing off the 60, how bullish that was last cycle. Bounced off the 60 here even, right? Look at that. Bounced off of it here. Very bullish, right? That was the end of the cycle there. From this month here, August 2016 to December 2017, you had a little bit over a year left in your bull cycle, right? And hey, that was August. Here on this bounce, here on our low there, I'm pretty sure that was August as well. Yeah, August. Isn't that crazy? And this topped off in December. We're thinking you might top off in November, pretty similar. And you were overbought pulled back, bounced off your 60, you're overbought, pulled back, bounced off your 60. Kind of interesting. I don't know. Interesting things, guys. I didn't even notice this was something that I noticed just now, but we bounced off the 60 this cycle. We did it last cycle in very similar areas of time in the cycle, and similar areas of time in the cycle here as well, right? Right before the first peak was achieved, right before the first peak was achieved. Right before the first peak was achieved, man. And I think by April, May, we're going there, guys. We're going there right now. But I think I've made the points. I think I've said everything. I'm just rambling at this point in time. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thank you all for being here. I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves.